Hi everyone, welcome to Max Wellness Podcast. Each week we chat with the world's top athletes, influencers and industry experts who share their experience, lessons learned and tactical steps to help you maximize your wellness and smash your goals. So on today's show, we are joined by Chester Elton, a best-selling author, LinkedIn influencer, and founder of The Culture Works. We are going to talk about his most recent book, Anxiety at Work, 8 strategies to help teams build resilience, handle uncertainty, and get stuff done. So welcome to the show, Chester. How are you?
I'm doing great. An honor to be on your first show, Hannah. I'm a huge fan of everything Chris Rainey and his work. So I am just delighted to be with you here today.
Chester, I think you're notorious on the scene, but for this show, I feel like you've got to give everyone a bit more of an intro. Tell everyone a little bit more about you and your journey to where we are now.
Sure. I'm Canadian. Yes. Adrian Gostick is my co-author. And for 20 years, we've been studying workplace culture. And we've written about, reward and recognition, gratitude, leadership, teamwork. When COVID hit, it's really interesting. It was our 14th book together, and we just finished Leading with Gratitude, which we both agree is our favorite book because we love the topic of gratitude and what it does for people, making them feel valued and included and so on. And yet we both agree as well that Anxiety at Work is probably our most important book because of the impact it has on people's lives, not just at work, also in their homes. So yeah, it's the culmination of 20 years worth of work, and we're delighted to share some of the research and the tactics and the strategies with you here today.
Amazing. And personally, I know this is obviously close to home for you, and that's how we connected around this. What's been the feedback so far from people? How long has it been since you published?
Came out in May, on May the 4th. May the 4th be with you.
Of course. I bet that was intentional. I bet you argued with the publisher. No, we've got to hold it. Let's hold it.
May the 3rd, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Under no circumstances, it has to be the 4th.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's come out in May, and since then we've had tremendous feedback. We've developed training to go along with it, and so we've had the opportunity to do virtual and even some small groups in person. And I'll tell you, Chris, the feedback is fascinating because it starts off, we talk to leaders. Here's how you can identify it without being too obtrusive, and here's some of the strategies to help people deal with it, help them take it home. Because my favorite statistic is if you feel valued and safe in the workplace, you have 150% better chance of being happy and feel safe in your personal life. So the ripple effect for us is very important. What the feedback we get, though, that is so fascinating is it starts out with, my people, they're, anxiety, they're suffering. This is going to be great. Thank you. And then the more we talk, it's like, me too. I suffer from anxiety too.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I'll tell you the message that's come back loud and clear as well is, as we go through the conversations and we talk about developing your listening skills, developing your empathy, is they say, I came in here very guarded, not wanting to really talk about it, which is not uncommon. You can relate to that, Chris, in your story. And now I know, get this, that I'm not alone. And the journey is hard when you're by yourself. It's easier when you know you're not alone and you have that trust. So the work has been really gratifying so far.
Yeah, because we obviously discussed that during our podcast together, and that was the biggest fear for me. Am I the only one? What are people going to think of me? Is my wife, friends, family going to think less of me? Are my employees going to think less of me? And it actually, to my surprise, and we've discussed many times before, end up becoming almost like a superpower. Like the more vulnerable you become, the more people connect with you, the trust, the engagement, personally, professionally, and most surprising, not so much now on reflection, is the amount of close friends and family around me that were also suffering. I'm like, wow, you? And it's always the people you least expect, because people messaging me saying, Chris, you do the podcast every day, you're really outgoing. And I'm like, those are some of the people that are suffering the most. They're just really good at hiding it.
Yeah. Well, that's the point, is people are really good at hiding it because of the stigma. And, in our research and in our teaching, we talk about we've got to normalize the conversation. This is a health issue. Everybody has suffered from anxiety at some level. Secondly, is to destigmatize it. You were a hockey player, you were a dancer, you wrench your knee, you turn your ankle, you take time off. And yet when you say, and that's okay, right? And yet when you say, I just feel overwhelmed, I need a mental break, you go, can't cut it. Yeah, just not who we thought he was, not who we thought she was. So to destigmatize it. And then that empathy part that you see that comes out, because, we think we're really good at hiding our anxiety. And yet people know there's something off. They don't know what it is. They just know it's not quite right. And, we tend to assume the negative, right? So is he cheating on his taxes? What's going on there? They know something's not quite right. And you had this experience, and we've all had it to some degree. When you finally come clean, people go, oh, that's it. Oh, listen, don't worry. I got your back on this. I know this is a big crowd and that makes you anxious. If you've got to cut a little, don't worry. So glad you showed up. For as much time as you can give us, it's great. And then when you need it, don't worry about it. We got your back. That rally, my dad, who was my greatest cheerleader and one of my all-time heroes, he used to say, when you really hit hard times, you find out who your true friends are, because they're the ones that rally around you. And those people that didn't rally around you, who cares? They were never your friends anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
100%.
We're so worried about these people, what people will think about us, and they're people we don't like anyway.
Yeah.
So, having that awakening and trusting your friends and those people that are really near and dear to you, and they rally around you, as you said earlier, everything gets better. Relationships get better. Trust goes up. You can breathe. And that idea that you're not alone, I think, is such a positive and powerful message.
I mean, there was a period of time when you and I hadn't really spoken for a little bit. And then, because we have so many friends in common, we were at a wedding, weren't we?
Yeah.
And then that's what we ended up reconnecting on anxiety. Because at the time, I was going through some awful anxiety. And then you were
and I was like, you, Hannah?
Again, it's the same thing. People assume because you're in front of people all day and you're teaching and you're being that big personality that all of a sudden you're not going to, but it is the pressure. And you're right. It's when you own it and you speak out loud about it, you give other people the okay, the go ahead to also do the same thing. And I found that so many times, and it's so uplifting.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. And, it's interesting as we've gotten deeper and deeper. It's almost, we assume that these high performers are the least likely. And yet you look at the Olympics. Here's Simone Biles, who was the greatest of all time. She used to perform pre-Olympics with a little goat on her outfit. Like she was the greatest, and she couldn't take it.
Well, she is the greatest of all time, though, Chester. Let's correct that.
Well,
yes, she still is.
Well, yes, I agree.
She still is.
And by the way, her greatness is magnified by the fact that she said, you know what, I need to take a break on here. And wasn't it wonderful to see her team rally around her? To your point, Hannah, when you've got these incredibly high achievers that come out and admit it, it gives everybody permission to talk about it.
Yeah.
And as we talk to leaders, we say, look, one of the best ways you can create a safe environment is through this empathetic listening and admitting that you've gone through similar things. So don't be embarrassed. Don't feel diminished, because I've been there too. And people aren't looking. And I got this very specifically, Hannah, you're going to love this, from our podcast we did with Chris. He said, when your people come to you with all their problems, they know you don't have all the answers. They know you didn't get a doctorate degree in psychology and counseling. All they really want you to do is listen. Just listen, empathize, make it safe. It's a huge step forward.
Yeah.
The safe space is a massive, massive thing.
Yeah. It's interesting because that was exactly what made me start talking about it. Here I was on my own podcast doing a podcast around well-being, and I had an executive, a top executive from one of the biggest brands in the world being vulnerable, and who I see as such a high performer. And I'm like, wow, like you. And then I've got, the CEO of one of the biggest well-being charities in the world also sharing. And I felt like such a hypocrite. And I'm like, I'm sitting here interviewing these people who are being super vulnerable, yet I'm in that exact moment still suffering, going, oh my God, it isn't a weakness. As some of the most high performing people in the world are also suffering. It was in that moment on that podcast live on LinkedIn that I was like, now's the time. So I don't think there's already a good time. And then my team was in the room. Like people were, I looked across and like people in my team were listening to me say it. I was looking at them while saying these things out loud for the first time in my entire life. And it was like terrifying and exciting at the same time. And the relief of
stress
the weight off my shoulders.
Yeah.
And it's been like nearly 2 years now. And ever since that day, I've never had a panic attack.
Really?
Yeah.
Never. I've been close, but the difference is now I can pick up the phone and be like, Chester, I'm not feeling great. Can we just have a chat, right? Or call up Tasha, my wife, and say, can you come pick me up from work? I need to just get out of here and I'm feeling really anxious. Like before I had no one to go to, so it was just...
It's crazy, you think you have no one, but in actual fact, you do have an entire tribe of people around you. But again, it's just because everyone's sort of suffering in silence.
No one
realised the tribe is there, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden you say it, and all of a sudden the tribe just extends and extends. You're like, wow, I've got all these people. This is amazing.
One of the most surreal moments for me during the pandemic is we have like a call with all of the boys where we had a Zoom call every week where the guys just get together and we just talk about crazy things and just catch up because we couldn't meet up. And I brought up my anxiety on there. It was weird, because you've got all of the boys who are like macho men and we're all, we're guys and we don't want to talk about these things. And
Debatable.
we spent about 4 hours with everyone being vulnerable, talking about it. And I was blown away. I think everyone was. We were like, we've known each other for 30 plus years, many of us. And it took this conversation. So like I found out friends were in counseling. I found out friends were like literally to the point suicidal at times that we never knew about. These are my best friends, man. And it was like an amazing moment, but also scared the life out of me. Like scared me to the point where I was like, we really need to talk about this. Because if the people that are that close to us that we don't know, that like, so it was a great moment, but it was one of those moments where like, it's just, we have to do more. We have to do more to remove the stigmatism that's attached to it.
Yeah. And see, here's the thing that's really interesting, and I'm glad you brought this up, is it's very individual. Everybody deals with it a little differently. Whether they become recluse or they become more boisterous, if they look to self-harm or to self-medicate. And so I love your story, Chris, about since then I haven't had another panic attack or an anxiety attack because I've got places to go. There will be people that will say, oh, so all I have to do is tell my friends and it'll never happen again. Well, that worked for Chris. It may be different for Hannah. It may be different for Chester, and that's okay. That's okay too.
Yeah.
And just know that rather than go to those deep, dark places, who do you call? Who do you trust? Where is it safe? In our work in culture, it's a very interesting, I love the work that was done on psychological safety. A wonderful breakthrough argument, Harvard School of Business, right? And I love that. Do I feel psychologically safe? I think through the pandemic, we've got to raise the bar a little bit and make sure people feel emotionally safe. There's a difference. Psychologically safe is, okay, I feel like I can express my opinions. It's very business centric. Emotionally safe is you're looking at me as a person, right? You're looking at me as somebody's son or daughter, or I'm part of a family. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I think those are important conversations to have too. And so, just like any other ailment, you're recovering from a broken leg and you're doing the rehab and there's a bit of a relapse. That's okay. Same thing with anxiety. You're going to deal with it. We're going to help you through it. You may have a relapse, and that's okay. To really make it emotionally safe, that your journey is going to be a little different, and we can deal with that.
And that you're right. That is something during that conversation I noticed. There was a couple of people that there were times where weeks on end they just disappeared. Yeah. And we just couldn't reach them, to the point where we'd have to go to their house and knock on their door just to check if they're okay, which is so scary when that happens because you just don't know. And there are others that deal with it via unfortunate addictions. Yep. You can read into that what you want. And then me, whereas just literally I hid it behind sports. Like I literally just did extreme sports and anything else to distract. Basically, I would constantly distract myself. And so work was one of those, which is not great because I'll just work myself to the point where literally kind of work myself sick. So I would have 3 or 4 months of crazy high performance and just work like a crazy person, and then end up having 4 weeks off sick because my body's just shut down and just exhausted, where I just can't get out of bed for a week, and then I'll do it all over again. That was my vicious cycle until, thankfully, that's no longer the case. But that was my way of dealing. Well, I wasn't dealing with it at all, actually.
No.
That's the problem. What are some things that companies can do, Chester, to help spot this? And because that's one of the difficult things, right?
Yeah. How do you identify it?
Yeah.
Right. And because people are good at hiding it.
Really
right?
good.
So we said, look for subtle changes in behavior. Somebody who's always on time all of a sudden is showing up a little late. Somebody whose reports are just immaculate and A+ work, all of a sudden it's starting to fall off. People that are normally really participative in conversations all of a sudden get quiet, or the opposite. Somebody who never loses their temper all of a sudden loses their temper. Our tendency is we tend to say, well, that's a one-off. Everybody has a bad day. Well, take a look at it a little differently, because, the numbers were fascinating as we looked at it. Pre-pandemic, 18%, so 1 in 5 workers said they dealt with some kind of anxiety disorder. In the middle of 2020, middle of the pandemic, it jumped up to 30%. That's a huge jump. What was really fascinating was in millennials and Gen Z, it was 42%. Wow. So now you're jumping up to almost half, right? And a couple other numbers that were really startling was 75% of millennials and Gen Z said that they had left a job recently due to a mental health issue. So why are they leaving? It's not safe to talk about it, because 90% of people that have some kind of anxiety disorder don't feel safe talking about it in the workplace. So it's really incumbent on us as leaders, and be true leaders, to say, look, I'm responsible for these people. And I want to say that again, I'm responsible for these people. Yeah, I get we've got customers and we've got a business to run and so on. These are people in my care. I just got off a conversation with a guy named Bob Chapman, wrote a fabulous book called Everybody Matters. And he's built this incredible company around caring leadership, empathetic listening. And he says, look, our mission is the people that come to work are people in our care. Think about how different that is. They're in our care. Our job is to make sure that they have a great experience at work, so that when they go home, they have a great experience at home. Like, the Society for Human Management Resources, or SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management. There you go.
It's long enough.
Yeah, close enough. Right? Do you know that heart attacks go up by 20% on Mondays because people dread going back to work? So literally, the way we manage people in the workplace is killing them. The number one, health issue is stress and anxiety. Well, what's the number one cause of stress and anxiety? It's your job, right? It's, 88% of people, you stop them in the street and say, do you love going to work? They'll say no. So again, part of the mission of this book and the research is, how do you identify it? And the last thing you want to do is say, by the way, Hannah, you're suffering from anxiety, aren't you? I've got my radar out, because if Hannah is suffering from it, the last thing she's going to do is admit it to that. So we teach some really subtle things. I've noticed is a great way to start the conversation. You know what, Hannah, I've noticed that, you just don't seem to be yourself. If you've got things going on at home with your kids and teaching, if you're worried about parents' health, you know what? Me too. We're all going through stuff like that. What can I do to help? Because I've just noticed you're just not your cheerful self. Maybe it's a one-off. I just want you to know, if there's stuff going on, I'm here to listen. I'm here to help, and start opening the door. And again, that empathy that says, I've been there too. Probably not to the extent or in the way that you are. Understand that you're not alone. I think that's just such a huge message. And once people start to let their guard down and they start to trust you and have those conversations, like happened with you, Chris, could turn into a 4-hour conversation about, hey, I had no idea. And the last point I want to make is, we've all got these super smart friends, right? I mean, the guy who's just the savant, our friend that she's just amazing, knows everything about everything. they're the ones most likely to suffer from anxiety. When you think of your super high achievers, they almost all have some kind of anxiety because they put so much pressure on themselves to perform. And we have a whole chapter on perfectionism and how we can deal with that. And by the way, perfectionism is much more prevalent in the millennial generation than any other generation. And we're trying to figure out why. And I think has a lot to do with TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Those perfect lives that we put online that nobody has.
That full sense of reality.
Yeah, I'm definitely a massive cult. I can literally overthink myself into paralysis because you're chasing this version of, it's not necessarily, I wouldn't say it's because of social media. It's just, it is when you're a high achiever, because it's almost like I don't want to do something unless I know I can do it to the absolute best of my ability. So if I'm not safely going to do that to the best of my ability, you know what? Let me just put that over there. I'm going to go back to it, but let me just put that over there for now.
Yeah, it's so funny. We put those almost exact words in the chapter on perfectionism. If I can't be perfect at it, I'm going to put it off. I'm not going to do it. We actually talked about in the military. They've got these elite fighting forces, and one of the most elite in the U.S. is the SEAL teams. They're just machines, and they talk about there's two kinds of soldiers that come into the SEAL program. There are the strivers and there are the optimists. And you say, well, what would be your guess as to who would get through this grueling training? Would it be the strivers or would it be the optimists? What would be your answer?
I would say the strivers.
I'd say the opposite. I'd say the optimists. Because when times are hard, the optimists will think it can get better. Things will get better. We'll get through this. Whereas the strivers will hit a point of, anyway, Chester's going to tell us the answer, but that's personally, I'll choose to be the striver.
See, I would say striver because there would always be pushing to get to the next level. They're always striving for the best.
All right. Interesting. Okay. We'll find out
now.
Talk
about perfectionists, yeah.
Here you go. So one of you is right.
That's the good news. That's okay. Yeah.
Please let it be
and it's Hannah.
Yes, because I'm the perfectionist and I like to win every time.
Because you know. Yeah.
Actually, it's the opposite. It's because they're not perfectionists.
Oh,
it's because all they
just
worry
strive
about
to do it. Yeah,
is just get me, on these marathon runs, just get me to the next telephone pole, just get me to the next hill. The optimists take a longer view, and it's too much to digest. So the strivers.
Well, now I know the context of it. I feel like Shane's almost that counterpart for me. And then I'm the kind of the striver who just goes crazy and goes at it. And I think there's a balance though. There's a healthy balance between those.
Yeah.
I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it is interesting because the strivers say, look, here's the assignment for today. I'm going to get through today. And they sleep like babies. The optimists are going through and saying, okay, but then there's this, and then there's that, and then there's, what's the big picture? And the strivers say, don't worry about the big picture. Just worry about now and get her done. And we teach, leaders in our courses, we say, look, be very specific about what your expectations are. Because if you're not really specific, your perfectionists will redo the assignment again and again and again until they get the feedback they're looking for.
It's so true.
Whereas, if as a leader say, look, I need this report. By the way, don't kill yourself. This is the basics I need. It doesn't have to be perfect. Get it to me by the end of the week. And then when you get the report, say, this is exactly what I was looking for. Job well done. Enjoy the weekend. Because if you don't say that, if you say, got the report, digging in over the weekend, you go, oh, got the report. Wasn't good enough. Let me redo that before you dig in over the weekend. Seriously, and there's this generational gap, right?
Or they spend the entire weekend worrying about it, because you haven't. And also, we've spoken about this before, Chester. Those type of situations is what leads to burnout. Where people, and especially now, there's no boundaries. Where people at home, they just work and overwork and overthink because they don't have that interaction with someone to have a look at it and say, yeah, that's great. And people are just going and going and going. And it's we're seeing levels of productivity going up. But my concern is that doesn't necessarily tell the full story. You can see productivity going up, but at what cost?
Exactly. Everybody thought in the pandemic that productivity would go in the well, right? It would decrease. The exact opposite happened.
Yeah.
Productivity skyrocketed because you didn't have the commute. You had all this time, there was no boundary between work and life. It's so funny. My son works at American Express and he's in analytics. And they said, well, we want you to come back to the work 3 days a week. And he says, well, why would you want us to do that? Look at the productivity of our team. In New York, much like London, the commute can be hellish.
Oh, yeah.
You can have an hour and a half commute one way. So that's 3 hours a day that you're just commuting. They said, wouldn't you rather have 3 hours in productivity? To your point, yes. And yet,
did you write that script for him, Chester? Chester, did you write that script for him? Did you say, this is what you're going to say? This is what you're going to say to your manager next time he says that. Here's the data.
Yeah. Well, here's what's interesting. His manager said it to him. He said, you know what? We've got to pitch
Oh, really?
Yeah, we've got to make the VPs understand, because it's really interesting. Now, I understand, and this has been fascinating for me as well, because, we're traveling more and we're meeting in smaller groups and doing some of our work live. People are starving to be together again. They want to be, there's that community. And yet there's the part of the community that says, I don't care if I ever leave my house ever again. Those ideas. So there's that balance. So it'll be really interesting to see how we get through this back to work. What does that look like? Here we're talking about the great resignation, that if you're going to make me go back to work 5 days a week, I'm just going to call a headhunter. There's never been a better market for employees, right? And I'm going to call a headhunter and say, look, this is what I do. Is there a company out there that will let me do what I do from home? Maybe come into the workplace once a week or maybe twice a month. Because if I can do that, I'll leave. So it's going to be really interesting how people manage. And it comes right back to, how do I feel about going back to work? What's my anxiety level? In New York, it's fascinating. People are saying, look, when I'm in the office, I feel like my company will protect me. It's getting to the office. I've got to drive to the train. I've got to take a train to Penn Station. Then I've got to get on a subway. Then I've got to go through the subway station. Then I've got to get in an elevator up to the 56th floor. Once I get to the 56th floor, things are great. It's getting there that's a little stressful. So it'll be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
Interesting. Should we hit the first question?
Huh? Yeah, that was just one question. That was just one. That was one.
I love that.
One question. I told you, one question, half an hour. That's it. That's all.
Chester, he's going to give you the gold.
You don't need to prepare much questions with Chester. He's ready for us.
So what about
Chris usually just says, Chester, how you doing?
Yeah. I wasn't even part of the last podcast. So
just into it. So how are you creating a community around how to support people with anxiety? So how are you making a community within workplaces?
Yeah, great question, Hannah. With this book, we're very mission driven. Adrian's son, Anthony, suffered from severe anxiety. One of my sons suffered as well. And so it becomes very personal for us that not only do we talk about what make the issue, normalize the issue and destigmatize it, what are the solutions? What are the strategies? What are the tactics? And part of it is that you may never feel safe talking about it at work. I mean, that's just reality. So we created, thanks to Chris, actually, he gave us the idea to create Together We Thrive .global. And so we've created an online community where you can have these safe conversations. We have workshops. We bring in, counselors and doctors and business people to talk about their journey and to create this place. If you don't have it at work, that you can have it, with our community. And we encourage you to go online and check us out. We publish our newsletter, our LinkedIn newsletter. We call it the Gratitude Journal, where we promote our podcast, where we bring in people like Chris, and we bring in these experts, and we have conversations. And you can play that at your leisure, so you can realize that you're not alone. And here are some people's very specific life examples that maybe you can relate to, maybe you can't, and yet we're having the conversation and we're bringing it out. Lastly, we've developed a great relationship with a company called the Culture Think Tank, where we're going to companies and saying, look, it's an issue, you don't know what to do about it. I mean, we can say, look, here's your employee helpline, download a meditation app, talk to your friends or your spouses. Do you have a strategy? And so along with our training where we walk leaders through and say, look, here's what you can do, right? Is then a dashboard where there's all these little micro surveys that go out. How are you doing today? How is your wellness? What's your happiness index? And it'll allow companies to actually then identify where the anxiety is, where it's bubbling up, what's causing that anxiety. And then two things you can do as a leader over the next 30 days, behaviors you can change to then reduce that anxiety, build trust, make an emotionally safe workplace, and build that up. It's really been fascinating. Initially we set out to write a book. And with the book came the training and the community and the podcast and now the dashboard. And I'll tell you, it's really been fulfilling because people come up and they will say, I've been doing what you've taught us. And it's not just making me a better worker or a better leader. It's making me a better husband, a better father, a better part of the community. And that's where, that's what you want to hear, right? I just don't want you to be a more productive worker. I want you to be a happier and better person. And so that's the big mission.
Was that quite an organic journey to go from the book to the podcast was that the plan, or did it just kind of happen?
It was very organic. Yeah, it was very organic. And it happened because, we went out and we found people like Chris, and Chris said, you know what, you need to develop a community. Here's the platform. Here's how you do it. We said, great. And then he said, by the way, I think you're the only authors I know on the planet that don't have a podcast.
So no pressure.
So what it was, I knew Chester loved talking, and finally he could get someone to listen. So I was like, if we give Chester
people to listen,
it's an excuse for him to talk into a microphone even when no one's around. So I was like, it's perfect for Chester. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I think, Chester, more importantly, on a serious note, it's an incredible way, both what you're doing for the podcast, the platform community, to reach people all over the world. And provide access to this information, and everything Chester's mentioned, everyone, the community, the resource, all free. So, definitely go and check it out. If you're listening, the link's already in the description. So don't leave the podcast just yet, but after, click the link below and check it out and join. And as I said, there's so many great resources in there from some incredible leaders and experts and high achievers that are being both in the book and on the podcast as well. So super exciting.
And it's interesting. Our eighth strategy, we have 8 strategies, is gratitude, which is fascinating because you can't be in a state of gratitude and a state of anxiety at the same time. And one of the best ways to reduce anxiety for the people that work with and for you is to let them know that they matter, that their work was impactful, that you saw it and you recognized it. And so, I've gotten to know Chris really well over the last year.
Too well.
And he wears my hockey jersey.
When no one's around.
Yeah. The point is, though, is in these conversations and specifically with Chris, it allowed us to grow organically because he shared his story and then he shared his expertise. We wouldn't have a podcast. We wouldn't have a community if it weren't for Chris. Yeah. We wouldn't, we wouldn't have a lot of the things.
But that's the same for everyone though, Chester, right? Like it kind of comes in roundabouts because when I first started our show and what we did, you supported us early on. You spoke at our events. You gave back, and you did that with no intention of anything. You don't expect something in return. And the same way where I was really excited for you and the podcast and everything. It's just I feel like there's so much people trying to compete with each other, whereas together we elevate each other, right? I don't see anyone as a competitor or anyone as like if I can help someone in a way, it doesn't cost me a lot of time, and the only thing it does cost me, I suppose, is time to just provide that knowledge. So something that's simple for me could be something for everyone else really struggles. And I realized that along the way, I'm like, oh, that's really easy. But it's easy when you know how to do it. And you've always been kind enough to give back to us, Chester. So for me, it's about reciprocating and making sure that we can help as many people as possible. And obviously, it's close to my heart as well. So of course.
Sure.
I want to help.
It's really interesting that you got to this a lot earlier in your career than I did because I was always in competition with everyone. It was Marshall Goldsmith that came in and we asked him to endorse one of our books and we didn't know him particularly well. It was at a book signing for one of his books in New York. And I said, Marshall, you're being so kind. You don't really know me that well. Why? And he said, Chester, there's 2 kinds of people in the world. Those that are in competition with everyone else and those that lift up everyone else. He said, I've chosen the latter.
I love that. I'm going to use that line next time. It sounds a lot better than the way I try to describe it. Well, and I'll call it, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the point is, when you say what goes around comes around and, kindness knows no barriers. My father would also say, look, you do things for the right reasons and good things happen. And don't keep score.
Yeah.
Don't keep score. Well, you owe me. I hate it when people say that.
Yeah. There's nothing worse. Yeah. And you can tell, like, 'cause we both, not sound arrogant, but we both get a lot of tons of emails every day and messages LinkedIn, and it's always ask. Yeah. And there's always this expectation. Whereas I think we've taken, indirectly or not, with intention or not, the opposite approach, where it's give. So I try and spend 90% of my time giving. And then what comes in back, you shouldn't expect it, but it's incredible. The relationships, the bonds, the experiences that come back your direction. It's hard to quantify, which is I feel like why most people don't do it, because they can't measure it as well. But that's not what it's about.
Yeah. And it's a great anxiety reducer. It's interesting. We've done a ton of work on gratitude. And the thing that I love most about when we teach leaders to express more gratitude, give more praise, give more recognition, is not only do the people that work with them feel great, the giver feels great. It's that old adage, right? The more you give, the more you receive.
Yeah.
And so what I love is when the light bulb goes off in leaders and say, you know what? They felt so honored and so valued, and I felt great doing it. Yeah, it's this virtuous circle. The more you give, the more you get.
Same for you, Hannah. How does it make you feel when you're working with clients?
Oh, that's actually why I do it. Because when people are like, what's your why? Why are you doing this? And usually it's obviously, a lot of people say because they've got a child. I mean, I don't have children, but they're like, because I'm doing this for my child. But I've realized from an early age, I've always stuck my neck out for other people. And my why has always been to make sure I get the best out of people. And it just so happened my avenue for that was fitness. And naturally, I went into the mental health side of fitness because it's something that I went through, and I was able to talk to my clients about it. I openly talk about the fact that I went to therapy, and I've got literally, I had a therapist for every single thing, to help me communicate, one holistic. I love talking about it. And again, naturally, when you talk about it, it then gives everyone else permission to do it. So yeah, my thing, it's just, my avenue was always to help people. I remember being 19 and I was teaching an aqua aerobics class. So bear in mind, so the demographic of ladies in there, we're gonna call them retired. They're retired ladies. And I remember I was there, and at the end, and one of the ladies, she just started talking to me about her marital problems. And I was like, I'm 19. I've only ever been in one relationship, and she was talking to me about her marital problems. But again, it's what you said earlier, Chester, where they just want to be heard. Yep. She wasn't getting heard elsewhere at that point. I was just...
You couldn't really give her advice.
I couldn't give her... I literally... I 19, I had no life experience. But it's strange. And I'd have always people breaking down on me in the gym. And I'd be like, oh, what do I do with this? But again, it's that same thing. They just want to be heard. And just for that split second, and a lot of time what I do in the gym, if I can see one of my clients, I can see exactly what you said earlier, Chester, where you can tell there's something off with them. Yeah. I remember there was something off with her. And I'm like, are you sure you're okay? She's like... Yeah, I'm fine. Cool. So then what I did on one of her weights, I just loaded up the weight. So she was having to go, ugh! And literally, I remember on her second or third rep, she did it. She had to make the noise, and she just went, bah! And burst into tears. I was like, there it is. And I just took her into the studio. I got all the stability balls out. I'm like, right, just kick them around the room. We don't need to talk about it. Just kick these balls around. And she was kicking and punching them, and we had a whale of a time. And she was crying while she was doing it, which, again, obviously you don't want to see anyone cry, but she needed that release because she was holding it in, and I could see she was. Yeah. So sorry, like Chester, I've gone off on a tangent there. It's fitness is my way of helping people. There was
that release is so important.
Oh, 100%. And fit is such an easy way to get people to do it. There was a question I was going to ask you, because obviously, again, with my line of work, and I'm sure conversation you guys have had, obviously you're teaching people to try and recognize, and your specific strategies to recognize the anxiety. Is there a way of teaching people empathy? Because what I worry about with these kind of things, it's quite easy to say to them, right, these are the steps, but it's quite hard to teach people genuine empathy.
In an authentic way.
In an authentic way where you're like, cool,
you don't want to come across force.
Yeah.
We've all had that manager where they said, how are you?
Oh, so many times.
And it's like,
talk to me. And I'm like, I really don't want to.
They're just saying it because they got told in the management book that one day they should say, how are you today? And then you go, I'm okay. They go, where's the sales? How many sales are coming this week? Oh, wait, you just said, how am I? Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I am listening. Really. I am. Yeah. That's really a tricky question, because I think there are people and there are managers that grew up and that's just not part of their DNA. They didn't grow up that way at home. They didn't grow up like that way in business. I think, the pandemic has helped a lot because it was across the board. Everybody got hit by the pandemic, whether you were a senior manager or a new employee or, young, old, and everybody in between. And I think that helped people realize that everybody's going through something. Everybody's going through something. And so I think experience can help you with that. I think when your senior leaders show their vulnerability, it gives permission again to be vulnerable. I think this is where, human resources can really step up and provide training and can provide, safe places for people to learn those skills. I think you can learn anything if you want to. There has to be a desire. Do you want to be a better leader? Do you want to be a better person? Do you really want to care for your people? And if the answer to those questions are no, we say, that's fine. You just can't work here anymore. You're going to find somewhere where you can be that kind of person. I think that the vulnerability goes a long way to teaching people empathy, personal experience. It's really interesting. You say, how do you deal with the loss of a parent? Well, until you've lost a parent, maybe you can't. Maybe you can't. So I think experience has a lot to do with that. I had an experience just recently in my neighborhood with one of our local merchants, and he told me about his son was killed in a car wreck, completely unexpected, and the son was the one that was going to take over the business. And it's really interesting. He's got this great big truck, and it parked in the lot. He says, "A gift from Bobby." And there's one of these moments that you kind of regret. I said, "Hey, can you introduce me to Bobby? Because my birthday's coming up and I'd like a truck too." And he said, "Oh yeah." He says, "Well, that's my son. He always wanted me to have a better truck." Oh. And I never did it. And then he died in a car wreck. And so that's a reminder that Bobby's always with me. Wow. And I thought, oh, probably shouldn't have joked about that. Yeah. Sorry for your loss. And tell me about him. And he told me about his son and told me, and those connections. Well, I haven't lost a son. And yet my parents lost 2 of their children. My mom had 7 kids, 5 survived. And they would talk about their loss. An older sister that I never knew, a younger brother that, I was 5 years old when he passed. Didn't really know him. He died as a baby. And yet they'd share their stories. And so when that came up, I could be more empathetic just because of our family experience. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've gotten kind of deep on this. Can you teach empathy? Yes, I think you can. I think life experience opens you up to being more teachable around empathy.
Even with my mum. So my mum suffers from anxiety. And back in the day, we used to be like, oh, something's wrong with mum. That was a panic attack. I didn't know that as a kid. So when my mum was having a panic attack as a kid, I didn't know what, and she never told me what it was. So when I had a panic attack, I was like, oh, this is the same as what happened with mum. And mum didn't tell no one. And mum didn't tell her friends, and mum didn't tell anyone. So that's what I do. I don't tell anyone. I don't tell my wife. I don't tell my friends. I don't tell, because that's what is learned behavior. I was a result of that environment. I was like, no one ever speaks about that in my family. So I'm not going to speak with my family about it.
Yeah, I think culture plays a huge part. Absolutely. The way you were brought up. That's why it's really interesting. I mentioned this gentleman, Bob Chapman, before. He's built this incredible company and this empathetic listening. His mission now is to take it to schools and homes.
Cool. Because
he says, look, by the time you get to the workplace, I mean, you're treating cancer, you're not curing cancer.
It's true.
So that was very interesting when he said that. I said, okay, well, there still is a need for curing, when people get to the workplace. And yet he says, if that's all you're doing, you're missing the point. You've got to go early, and you've got to go deep, and you've got to go fast. And I think that's a wonderful mission, because as I mentioned before, my favorite research number is when you're happy and engaged at work, you're 150% more likely to be happy and engaged in your personal life. I do love it when people say, you know what, I'm so much happier at home now. And you go, great. Because, on your tombstone, you don't want to say Chris Rainey, great podcaster. You want to say.
I do want that, Chester. I want Chris Rainey, breakdancer podcaster.
Legendary
podcast. Exactly. Legendary podcast, yeah.
And yet, if you had your choice, you say Chris Rainey, great husband, great father, great dad. I think you take the latter.
Yeah, definitely. And great podcast at the
bottom.
It's tiny writing.
Don't forget.
Yeah.
And brought Hannah with him.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love a little stone microphone. It'd be perfect.
This went really west.
This is what happens when you have Chester on the show. He just takes you there. You never know.
Oh, I love it. We do have another question. So
that's two now. We've got through
two.
I feel like we're doing all right.
Doing fantastic. So many businesses have spent the last 12 months obviously in crisis mode because of the COVID, which will inevitably be taking a toll on colleagues who are feeling burnt out. Like, because we discussed before, you don't have that commute. You don't have that time where you would switch off in offices. You would just walk around and have a chat. You just don't have that now. So what can businesses do to ensure that we reduce reduce anxiety and stress at work, ensuring workers do not suffer any long-term impacts from this?
Overload is a big cause of anxiety. And I think at work, you've got to make sure that you're not just burying people. And we tend to do this with our high achievers because they never say no.
No, they're just like more.
Right. Bring it on. And they're afraid to say no because then if I say no and I say I'm at my limit, I might not get that promotion. I might not get that plum assignment. So I think in the workplace, you've got to be really careful on the overload part, making sure that you rotate responsibilities, that you're not just crushing certain people. On the other hand, I think personally you need to take responsibility for that as well. And I'm a big fan of rituals. When do you get your rest? Are you eating well? Are you getting exercise? I know for Chris, those are three things that are really important for you in managing your anxiety. Yeah. And me too. In the morning, if I don't get up and go for a walk for a couple of miles, it's so interesting. And I've trained my mind and say, Chester, you never regret getting up and getting out. You always regret not doing it. Today, have no regrets. Just go do it. Yeah. I'll tell you, one of our cousins, we were at a family gathering a little while ago, and she had this great T-shirt. She's quite an athlete, right? And the T-shirt said, I kind of want to go for a run, and I kind of want to stay in bed. So have no regrets and go for the run. So while in the workplace, I think we can do a lot to reduce overload, be very clear in our communication, reduce those anxieties, specifically around perfectionism, sometimes good is good enough. And then I think, you really got to empower your people to take ownership for themselves, for their own engagement, for their own well-being. What are the rituals? What are some things they can help you with, right? Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Make sure you're eating well. Make sure that, you're taking time off. I love Apple Watches that, get up and move around every hour for a few minutes, get your circulation going, provide those kinds of things. I love companies that provide gym memberships. What I wonder is, do they follow up? So I know you've got the membership. Did you go?
Yeah, that's the metric you want. Not this many people have the app. You're right as well. I think to add to what you said, Chester, I do think companies have a responsibility to set boundaries, and technology is also a part of that. Even as a small business that I run, we have your email will go. Are you really sure you want to email Hannah, Chris? It's 10 p.m. This can be sent tomorrow, right? And it reminds me, it checks me, and I'm like, okay, schedule for tomorrow. Or our communication apps, you will not, if you send a message after work hours, the app is already set up that the employee will not receive that until the next day. So there's and set clear boundaries. You can't book a time in my diary at lunchtime. So just block those out. No one can book lunchtime calls with anyone, for example. As well.
It's so interesting you say that, Chris. Mercy Niue, who's this executive I used to coach down at the World Bank, we've become great friends. She got promoted, and she was one of the ones that got buried because she always got it done. And she said, look, I'll take this promotion under these circumstances. We're going to work like crazy Monday through Thursday. Friday, no meetings. Friday is the catch-up day. And at 5:00 Friday, everybody goes home and there are no emails over the weekend. Now, easy to say that.
Yeah.
The way she would blow that all up is if Sunday morning she sent out an email and said, I told them all, I don't want to know, don't do anything until Monday. Doesn't matter. You've ruined their Sunday because all they're thinking about all day Sunday is how they're going to do what you asked them to do Monday. So when the leader sets the parameters, you got to walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk. And I love that she set it up. And, her superiors were very skeptical that they could get the work done in the 4 days with the catch-up day Friday. The productivity in our team has skyrocketed.
It's the same with us on Mondays, Chester. Yeah. So all of our team comes in on a Monday and we just collaborate. We're just here. And the amount of ideas and innovation and oh my God, that's how we solve that problem that have come from us just being in that space together. And yeah, it's not been easy because people naturally want to flow back to their meetings or naturally want to go like, no, come on, this is the day we come together and we collaborate and we do that. I was interviewing the chief talent officer of Ford recently, Chester, and one of the interesting stats he said to me, he said, I realized that they've got this really cool platform which tells them this email or this message you sent resulted in X many hours of work amongst this many employees. Don't know exactly how it works, but he said he sent an email on a Saturday a few weeks ago, and he got an email back from the system saying that one email you sent on Saturday resulted in like 50 plus hours of work that you created.
Wow.
Can you, because that person called this person and that person called, and it can track through that this many emails were sent and this many activities were created in their dashboard just because he couldn't wait. And by the way, on the weekend, those hours, we're talking about 50 hours of work he created. And he was like, I couldn't believe it. And he's like, we have a real responsibility of leaders to think about those things. And he just sent it completely, just, I'll quickly reply back. You know, he wasn't even thinking about the intention.
Because he has a spare minute.
Because he has a spare minute. But then that person called this one. And all of a sudden, there's 50 hours of work on a weekend. These people should be relaxing and having, you know, a recharging.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So, you know, back to your question, and that is, what can you do? Although these are all great suggestions. Make sure you've got the parameters set up. Make sure you abide by them, and give people permission, you know, to take ownership themselves and say, what are your daily rituals? I've got 11 things that I try to do every day. Just, you know, and one is just meditate for 10 minutes. One is to post a little something I'm grateful for on LinkedIn. One of them is say my prayers, read my scriptures. I mean, everybody's going to have a different list, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm very forgiving of myself, by the way, back to perfectionism. If I get 7 of the 11 done or 9, that's okay. Tomorrow's another day. We'll start again. It'll be fine.
That's another part in it, to give ourselves a break. Like, it's,
forgive yourself. Absolutely.
Chester, I wanted to hear your thoughts on this. I've been chatting with a lot of leaders recently about this idea, and you're kind of working on it a little bit with a culture index of the future, where we have the same way we have a CEO and finance director sitting down looking at the P&L of an organization. We need to get to the point where we have a P&L for well-being, where we sit down and we can have a well-being pulse of the organization and track those metrics in the same importance that we do when we're looking at our P&L. Do you think, how far do you think we are away from that? Because I feel like, you know, the CHRO, the heads of wellbeing, they've been front and center over the last year and a half. Do you think we're going to slowly revert to old habits, or are you positive that we're going in the right direction?
You know, I think it's like a lot of things, Chris. I think those people that really get it. And I don't think they're far away. You know, I mean, even this dashboard that we're creating, we're creating the metrics and the data and then track the behavior. Well, I don't think it's a huge leap to say, well, how did that impact productivity? How did that impact turnover?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think we're very close for the people that care. For the people that don't
that's
care.
The important part. That's the important part.
Yeah. Well, and that's it. And, you know, the CEO roundtable that said, we're going to care for our people. And, you know, people really are our number one resource. Yeah, that sounds great. What did you do about it? Yeah. You know, how deep did you go? Do you really care about your people? Because if you did, you know, people wouldn't be killing themselves Monday morning because they had to go to work, you know? So it's a fascinating dilemma. And, you know, all the work that Adrian and I have been doing on culture over the last 20 years, we'll speak at these conferences, and it'll be an association.
When we're back together.
Yeah. And people will come up to us and say, oh, boy, I love your message about, you know, an all-in culture, a healthy culture, a culture of gratitude. You've got to talk to my boss. Say, great. Why do you want us to talk to your boss? Because our boss doesn't get it. Our culture is toxic. You say, you know what? Your boss will never talk to me because your culture is toxic. You know who calls us? People that have great cultures and want to keep it that way. Leaders that really do care about their people and want to make sure that their people know and that they build on that. So, you know, the answer to the question is, I don't think we're very far away at all from connecting those dots in the cultures and the companies with the leaders that care. And that's it. And hopefully that then becomes the beacon and people will follow. Although our experience is sad that even when you talk about phenomenal cultures and you give them all the data and here's exactly how you do it, I'm shocked at how few companies actually follow through.
Yeah.
And, you know, Hannah, you'll know this from your work. Say, look, if you'll do this, 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 and this, you're going to lose weight. You're going to feel better. You're going to. How many people actually do it?
Yeah, so
that's literally the hardest part, and they think that you're right. It's they think the doing is the hard
knowing
part,
doing
and
gap.
I'm like the doing is like the coming into the gym. That's not the hard part. That's the real easy part. It's all the extra stuff that you have to do, the foundation work that you have to do in order to make that happen. But this is kind of obviously with our ditch the desk and our ditch the day workouts. This is what I think we're trying to get companies. So going into, if they had like a chief wellbeing officer, we're trying to get companies to really buy into.
Sure.
It's fantastic that you want this program. Because then we were discussing like, do we put up a recorded one? We're like, well, no. The whole point of it being is that we need them to buy into that. We want tell all your employees to come off at 1:00, and they need to everyone come on and do this workout. There's no point in saving it. Otherwise, people will just work through their lunch and be like, oh, it's all right, I'll do it at 5:00. When it defeats the whole object. We need the companies to buy in. No, everyone log off now, go and do ditch the desk. Then we want everyone to go, and we're talking about obviously like maybe doing like a live Q&A where everyone has to go out and go for a walk, weather dependent, or just whatever, and do it just to, again, just get people actually away from their desks.
Sure. And changing behavior is hard. It is.
So hard.
All the cultural norms. I will tell you a fascinating statistic. So people that have had heart valve bypass operations. I mean, this is a serious operation. Like it's cholesterol all built up and they do a heart bypass. Do you know what percentage of people actually change their diet?
I don't even want to know because it's going to be so bad. Yeah. Go on, tell us.
1%.
No.
It's 1%.
I feel like I should have known
listen,
that.
I've got a cousin. He's had bypass surgery 4 times.
Whoa. So he's had heart surgery. Also, basically he's had heart
different
surgery.
valves.
I was going to say there's only four areas that you can have that on anyway.
So he had all 4.
And as soon as he got out of the hospital, do you know where they went? He went and had a double bacon cheeseburger.
No.
I went, you got to be kidding me.
He's just trying to become the bionic man, isn't he?
It's painful.
Oddly enough, he's still alive. So that's good for him.
Man.
You see the same thing with people that have the like, I don't know what it's called, where they have like part of their stomach stapled, like they cut.
Oh, and they think that that's going to be the answer to everything.
And then they slowly just stretch it back out again to the same size by eating food. It's unbelievable.
I guess what we're saying earlier,
I've got this ring, I can eat whatever I want.
Yeah, I've got this small stuff. Exactly.
So on the positive side, though,
yeah. Let's end on a positive.
Is that the breakthroughs really are so satisfying. Mm-hmm. And I think particularly when you talk about mental wellness, mental well-being, that there is that point where people really do hit rock bottom. Mm-hmm. They really do get to the point where they need somebody to reach out to them. They need to know they're not alone. And if you can be that person, if you can be that leader, boy, I'm telling you. And we've talked about this before. It's not just saving a good worker or saving productivity or innovation. There are occasions where you will literally save people's lives. Because when you go down that deep, dark hole and you think you're all alone, it gets really negative and really dangerous really quickly. So, the mission isn't just to reduce turnover. Yes, that's a nice byproduct. It really is to create happier and engaged people that go home happier and engaged and just have healthier lives. To your point, Chris, it's the tide that raises all ships. And how do we do it? We create these emotionally safe places to work where your people trust you, where they can talk to you about it. It's safe. They're not alone. You're an ally and you can help. And boy, isn't that what we're all striving for? I love Marshall Goldsmith. He's a good friend of ours. He wrote the foreword to our book, Leading with Gratitude. And he said, the line that just struck me, he said, whether you're bagging groceries or you're a captain of industry, there's one thing that we all have in common, no matter where you live and work. We all just want to be happy. Let's get to that. And you can't be happy if you're suffering from anxiety. You can't be happy if you're dreading going to work. So let's start with the things we can control. And let's make the world a little better place. Are you in?
We're in.
Love that. Chester, so before we wrap up, we'd like you to give our listeners a parting piece of guidance. And that is, what would you suggest? It's going to be our question to everyone. So you're the one that we get to start on. What bit of advice would you give to anyone that's listening to this to maximize their wellness?
I think it's what we've been talking about, all session. And that is just remember, you are not alone. That there are people that care about you, that love you, that are cheering for you. and they are there to help you just for the asking. All you've got to do is ask, and they will rally around you. And I know Chris can testify to this. I can testify to it. My children can testify to it, that never forget you are never alone. More people love you and cheer for you than you would like to believe.
Yeah.
Just ask. It's a safe place.
Amazing. And Chester, last thing, where can people check you out, connect with you, join the community, the podcast, everything else? Where's the best place?
Yeah, we thrivetogether.global is our online community. Listen to our podcast, Anxiety at Work. GosticandElton.com is a great place to find what we do and how we do it. And of course, LinkedIn. We've got all kinds of stuff we publish there, and our gratitude journal. As Chris mentioned, it's all free. We're very mission driven. We're here to help. We want you to know that there are lots of resources out for there. You can be happy. You can be fulfilled. It's there for everybody. Please check us out and follow up.
Amazing. And as always, if you click the link below, the links are already there. So
as if by magic.
As if by magic, they're already there. So make sure you go connect with Chester on LinkedIn. You've also got the LinkedIn newsletter that Chester has, which is amazing. So make sure you check that out. There's over 100,000 people, including me, that read that every single week. That says something as well. But apart from that, thank you so much for being our first guest on the Max Wellness podcast. We appreciate it.
Really appreciate you taking the time to come and join us and spread your knowledge. Far and wide.
Hannah and Chris, I'm always humbled when people loan us their platforms and magnify the message. So my bit of gratitude to you is thank you for having me as a guest. I'm honored. I love people that are mission driven, and the two of you clearly are. So thanks for having me as a guest.
Thanks, Chester. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers.